The Galactic Federation was vast, encompassing hundreds of intelligent species from every corner of the known universe. Some were ancient, their empires stretching back thousands of years, while others were young and eager, having only recently mastered the intricacies of interstellar travel. Humanity fell into this latter category, a recent addition to the Federation, having discovered faster-than-light travel only a few centuries ago. Despite their relative youth, the humans had made a curious impact on the galaxy, mostly because of one peculiar behavior. They always came with a warning. At every diplomatic summit, every trade negotiation, every casual introduction to new species, the humans would politely but firmly issue a reminder. Please, they would say, don't antagonize us. We prefer peace, and we're good friends. But it's better if we're left alone when it comes to hostility. To most of the older, established species, this was a strange request. In their experience, new civilizations usually took one of two paths. Either they flaunted their newfound power, eager to prove themselves, or they showed deference, hoping to gain allies among the more advanced species. The humans did neither. They neither boasted of their strength nor showed fear. They simply asked, again and again, for others not to provoke them. One of the more seasoned members of the Federation, the Viric, a proud, warlike species known for their reptilian features and towering forms, found this behavior almost insulting. Ambassador Trath, a figure of significant influence within the Viric, found humans baffling. He had encountered countless species over his lifetime, had seen wars, alliances, and entire civilizations rise and fall. But he had never encountered a species that seemed so insistent on being left alone. To him, it smacked of either arrogance or cowardice. At a diplomatic summit held on the planet New Horizon, a sprawling, neutral territory known for its majestic floating cities and advanced meeting halls, the Viric were finally face-to-face with the humans once more. This summit was a grand occasion, with representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss trade routes, territorial borders, and research cooperation. The humans had sent Ambassador Carla Ruiz, a middle-aged diplomat with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes that had witnessed enough interstellar politics to recognize the nuances of the Viric's demeanor. As the discussions wore on, it became clear that humans and Viric had interests in the same sector of space, a mineral-rich cluster that was valuable to both. Ambassador Carla had presented a proposal that emphasized shared resources, a fair compromise to avoid disputes. The other delegates considered her words carefully, weighing the logic of her plan. But Trath, seated across the vast table, felt a surge of irritation at her calm, almost casual tone. When she finished, Trath rose from his seat, towering over the assembly with an intimidating posture. His scales caught the artificial light, casting sharp shadows across his face as he fixed a condescending gaze on Carla. Ambassador Ruiz, he began, his voice a deep, rumbling growl that echoed across the hall. Do you truly believe your kind has the right to dictate terms to the Viric? Your people are new here, mere children in the galactic arena. What right do you have to challenge a species that has ruled its sector for millennia? The room fell silent, delegates from all corners watching the exchange with interest. Carla, however, remained calm, her expression unreadable. She regarded Trath thoughtfully, as though he were an impulsive child in need of guidance rather than a powerful ambassador. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady, carrying an authority that seemed to cut through the Viric's hostility. Ambassador Trath, she said, the humans do not seek to challenge anyone's authority. We believe in collaboration, in working together. That is why we propose a shared stewardship of the sector. It benefits us both. Trath sneered. Humans speak of peace as if it is a shield. But your warnings, that constant plea to be left alone, reveal something else. You ask us not to provoke you as though you were some sleeping giant. But let me be clear. The Viric do not fear you. We are not intimidated by hollow warnings. Carla's expression shifted slightly, her eyes narrowing, though her demeanor remained calm. Ambassador, we issue that request not out of arrogance, but out of respect. We value peace above all else. But as history has shown, when we are pushed, we respond. And we have learned that response often comes at a cost, one we would prefer to avoid for everyone's sake. Trath scoffed, his laughter a harsh, guttural sound that echoed through the hall. Is that a threat, human? He leaned in, his massive form looming over her. You speak as though humanity is a force to be feared. But tell me, Ambassador, what would your people do if we did push? What could you possibly hope to accomplish? Carla sighed, her eyes heavy with a weariness that seemed unusual for a diplomat. She met his gaze with a quiet intensity, her voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying an unspoken weight. Ambassador Trath, I urge you to remember that humans are survivors. We have faced challenges that would have wiped out countless others, and we have adapted, evolved, and learned from each one. I'm not here to boast, nor to threaten. I am here to remind you that humanity values peace because we understand the true cost of war. The other delegates exchanged glances, a murmur rippling through the room. The elder races, particularly those that had brushed against humanity in various alliances, began to look at the humans with newfound curiosity and caution. Trath, however, was unfazed. To him, Carla's words were nothing more than carefully veiled attempts at intimidation. He was done with this conversation. Enough, he snarled, his voice reverberating through the hall. The Virik do not bow to empty words. He straightened, a cold smile spreading across his scaled face. If humanity wants respect, then let them earn it on the battlefield. The room fell into stunned silence. This was no longer diplomacy. Trath had just declared open aggression, an invitation for conflict, a line rarely crossed in such formal settings. Carla took a deep breath, her eyes hardening. She looked around at the other delegates, then returned her gaze to Trath. Ambassador, she said softly, we did try to warn you. Her words hung in the air, a solemn echo that left an eerie stillness over the hall. With that, she collected her notes, nodded respectfully to the other delegates, and exited the room, leaving an air of uncertainty in her wake. Trath, for his part, felt a surge of triumph. He had called the humans bluff, and they had backed down, just as he expected. The other delegates watched her departure with mixed emotions. Some were impressed by her poise, while others wondered if Trath had just made a terrible mistake. Humans were, after all, an unpredictable species. Many had underestimated them in the past, only to be surprised by their adaptability and tenacity. Over the next few days, Trath's decision spread quickly through Virik society. Virik commanders and soldiers alike prepared for what they saw as a minor skirmish, eager to test the human strength. The Virik were not just prepared for war. They were excited by the prospect, eager to showcase their superiority to a species they considered laughably weak. And so, a week after the summit, a Virik warship intercepted a human exploratory vessel in the disputed sector. The Virik commander hailed the human ship, demanding its immediate surrender. The response from the human captain was calm and collected. We would advise you not to engage us, Commander. We are here under diplomatic terms. Let's avoid unnecessary conflict. The Virik commander laughed, issuing the order to open fire. He expected a swift victory, a chance to prove Virik superiority. But what followed was something none of his crew could have anticipated. The human ship moved with an agility that defied its size, evading each attack with precision. Within moments, it returned fire with advanced weaponry, breaking through the Virik shields in calculated strikes. Alarms blared on the Virik ship as their systems faltered, smoke filling the command deck. The crew was in disarray, unable to comprehend how this human vessel, which they had considered little more than a pest, had dismantled their defenses so easily. The human captain issued one final warning. This is your last chance. Stand down, or we will proceed with countermeasures. The Virik commander, shaken but defiant, chose to press forward. He fired again, but this time, the human ship responded with full force. Within minutes, the Virik vessel was adrift, its systems disabled, its crew struggling to keep life support online. Back in the Virik command center, word of the incident spread rapidly. Trath received reports that his forces had suffered an unexpected defeat, and more unsettling reports trickled in from across the galaxy. Human ships were appearing near Viric space, each demonstrating an unexpected level of precision and strategy. It was as if humanity had prepared for this very scenario. As Trath sat in his chamber, contemplating the unexpected turn of events, he began to realize the depth of his error. Humanity's warnings hadn't been empty threats. They had been genuine attempts at peace, reminders that humans understood the devastation of war all too well. And now, with every passing moment, it became clear that humanity's resilience was not a bluff. It was a promise. The skirmish in the disputed sector was only the beginning. Ambassador Trath and the Viric Council had severely underestimated the reach, resilience, and tactical prowess of humanity. The Viric, used to straightforward battles and displays of brute strength, were ill-prepared for the methodical, unrelenting pressure the humans began to apply on every front. In just a matter of days, the humans had transformed from an underestimated species into a coordinated force that was everywhere and nowhere. Word of the Viric defeat quickly spread throughout the Galactic Federation. It was unheard of for any species to challenge the Viric so directly, much less emerge victorious in any way. Other ambassadors and delegations began watching the humans closely, with a mixture of caution and fascination. The warning that had once seemed so peculiar, "Please, don't antagonize us," suddenly seemed more like a carefully worded prophecy. In the command center on Viric Prime, Trath paced back and forth, watching reports flood in. Skirmish after skirmish, Viric ships found themselves outmaneuvered, and supply routes mysteriously disrupted. Even their most fortified checkpoints along their borders were no longer secure. Every time the Viric forces attempted to advance or mount a counterattack, the humans had already anticipated their move, and any ground gained was soon lost in a strategic retreat that left the Viric overextended and vulnerable. Trath could hardly believe the reports. Humans, a species that had practically begged for peace, were demonstrating an efficiency in combat that made even veteran Viric commanders uneasy. He could see the unease in his officers' faces as they scrolled through the battle logs, reading accounts of human tactics they couldn't understand, tactics that were grounded in precision, adaptability, and a relentless persistence that seemed almost mechanical in nature. Desperate for answers, Trath called for a briefing with his top commanders. They gathered in the Grand Council room, their scaled bodies tense with frustration. Holographic maps of Viric territory flickered in the center of the room, showing the ever-growing number of disruptions along their borders. Red markers representing Viric forces were scattered and disorganized, while the blue markers of the human fleet seemed to move with a disturbing unity, flowing around Viric defenses like water around a rock. One of the generals, a seasoned warrior named Crother, leaned forward, his voice heavy with anger and confusion. "How is this possible? We're stronger, better equipped, and more experienced. These humans should be nothing more than pests to us." Another officer, a strategist named Selak, shook his head, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. "Strength and equipment mean nothing if they aren't used wisely. The humans, they don't fight like we do. They avoid direct confrontation and instead strike where we are weakest. They don't move to conquer. They move to destabilize. It's almost as if they've studied our every move, our every weakness." Trath clenched his fists, his claws digging into his scaled palms. He remembered Ambassador Carla's calm warning, the way she'd spoken of humanity's resilience as though it was a deeply rooted, almost instinctual force. "They warned us," he muttered, his voice laced with disbelief. "They told us to leave them alone, and we laughed." Crother scoffed. "Warnings or not, we cannot allow this affront to stand. We are Viric. We conquer. We do not cower before lesser species." Selak shook his head slowly. "Ambassador, with all due respect, it's not about cowering. It's about understanding. I've reviewed their tactics, studied their movements. Humans don't fight like anyone we've encountered. They exploit everything. Our resources, our communication delays, even our pride. Every time we try to rally, they've already shifted position." The room fell silent as the implications of Selak's words settled over them. This was no ordinary opponent, no conquerable foe. The humans were fighting not with sheer force, but with precision, knowledge, and an unsettling resilience that bordered on obsession. Trath realized that this conflict was personal for them. The humans were no longer interested in diplomacy or compromise. They had warned the Virak, and now they were showing what it meant to cross the line. In the following days, the Virak Council authorized full mobilization. Fleets were dispatched to every known human outpost, and ground forces were deployed to planets suspected of harboring human sympathizers. The Virak were relentless, determined to erase any memory of their defeats. Yet, despite their efforts, the humans continued to slip through their defenses like shadows. Entire battalions would arrive at what they believed to be human strongholds, only to find them deserted, booby-trapped, or worse, rigged with sophisticated surveillance that fed the humans' critical Virak data. The Virak were not merely losing battles. They were hemorrhaging resources and morale. As weeks passed, it became clear that humanity was not just resisting. It was teaching the Virak the true meaning of endurance. Human fleets began appearing in unexpected places, not only within Virak borders, but also in territories where the Virak held sway over smaller, intimidated species. Humanity's presence alone was enough to inspire some of these subjugated worlds to resist, refusing to supply the Virak forces or aid in their logistics. Humanity had become a symbol of defiance, their resilience infecting even those who had never known Earth. Then, the stories began. Virak soldiers stationed on border worlds recounted harrowing tales of encounters with human commandos, quiet, disciplined figures clad in dark armor, moving with an almost eerie efficiency. They struck at night, leaving no traces, and vanished before reinforcements arrived. Rumors spread that these human soldiers didn't sleep, that they possessed a resolve unlike any other, an ability to keep going long after any other species would have given up. The Virak soldiers began to call them ghosts, a fitting name for the elusive, unstoppable force that haunted their every move. Trath heard these stories with a mixture of disbelief and dread. How could such a young species, one that had only recently joined the Galactic Federation, have trained warriors of this caliber? How could they possess knowledge of tactics and strategies that seemed perfectly tailored to dismantle Virak forces? The answer was as troubling as it was unavoidable. Humanity had learned from its own history. They had adapted to countless crises, survived wars, conflicts, and hardships that had shaped them into a force unlike anything the Virak had anticipated. Finally, desperate to regain control, Trath ordered a bold strategy. He would launch a direct assault on Earth itself, hoping that striking at humanity's home world would destabilize them. If he could take Earth, he reasoned, the humans would be forced to surrender. The Virak fleet assembled, gathering some of the largest warships in their arsenal, and set course for Earth. But as the Virak fleet entered human-controlled space, they were met with an eerie silence. No defenses, no warning systems, nothing. The humans seemed to have abandoned the sector. Trath ordered his ships to move forward cautiously, suspecting a trap, but his pride drove him forward. He was determined to show the humans that Virak pride could not be tarnished. Suddenly, human ships appeared from the darkness, seemingly materializing from empty space. They moved with a precision that defied explanation, surrounding the Virak fleet before Trath's forces even realized they were there. Communications went down, and in the silence that followed, Trath felt a chill run down his spine. He realized too late that he was surrounded. Then, over a secure channel, came the calm, unmistakable voice of Ambassador Carla Ruiz. "Ambassador Trath," she said, her tone almost compassionate, "I told you. Humanity does not seek war, but we will not be threatened. You had your chance to walk away." Trath clenched his fists, his voice shaking with anger and fear. You would dare to strike at us here?" Carla's reply was firm. "We tried diplomacy. We tried to warn you. But you forced our hand." With that, the human ships opened fire, not with reckless abandon, but with a calculated intensity that targeted the Virak fleet's critical systems. One by one, Virak warships were disabled, left adrift, their crews powerless. Trath's own ship was struck, and as he felt the shock of impact rattle through the hull, he realized the full scope of humanity's strength. They were not merely a young race. They were a people forged through fire, resilient in ways that defied comprehension. As Trath's ship drifted, powerless and defeated, he looked out at the stars, the harsh truth settling over him. Humanity's warnings had not been idle threats. They had been sincere requests from a people who knew the horrors of conflict and wished to avoid it. The Virik had chosen pride over prudence, and now they were paying the price. The message was clear. Humanity was a force that thrived under pressure, a species that could adapt, endure, and overcome in ways that the galaxy had never seen. In that moment, Trath understood the meaning behind Earth's warnings, the deep-rooted wisdom that only now he could appreciate. Never antagonize a species that values peace, because when they are forced to fight, they will unleash a fury beyond anything you can imagine. In the dark silence of his ship, Trath sat, defeated, haunted by the realization that the humans had tried to spare him this fate. The Virik were in disarray. Across their territory, stories circulated of the relentless human resistance that had dismantled fleets, disrupted entire supply lines, and left even the most fortified outposts vulnerable. No one had expected the humans, a species once dismissed as young and insignificant, to strike with such calculated power. It was as if every weakness, every blind spot in Virik defenses had been anticipated and exploited with precision. Ambassador Trath returned to Virik Prime, a shadow of the proud figure he had once been. He had seen humanity's strength firsthand, experienced the devastation they could unleash when pushed beyond patience. The defeat had shaken him deeply, and his people, witnessing their leader's broken spirit, began to question their assumptions about the galaxy's balance of power. The Virik High Council met in an emergency session, a gathering of their most esteemed leaders. The council hall was a cavernous chamber, with walls made from the black stone of their homeworld, towering columns lined with the battle trophies of their ancestors. Normally, the hall was filled with the confident murmurs of a species accustomed to dominance. But now, there was only silence as the council members processed the reports from the human front. Counselor Zarek, an elder known for her strategic mind, broke the silence. Ambassador Trath, you claimed that humanity posed no threat to us, that their warnings were merely the words of a lesser species. And yet, here we stand, on the edge of collapse. Her voice was a mixture of anger and disappointment. Trath's gaze dropped, his posture stiff with shame. I underestimated them. They spoke of peace, and I assumed it was a sign of weakness. I thought them naive, but I was wrong. Humanity does not fight as we do. They are precise, unrelenting. They know how to exploit our every move. Counselor Zarek frowned, her gaze hardening. We have always taken pride in our strength, in our power. But perhaps we need to understand what kind of strength humans possess. We need to know how they became this resilient, this capable of withstanding our best efforts. She paused, then added, Ambassador, we cannot afford any more mistakes. After hours of deliberation, the council made a difficult decision. They would reach out to humanity, not with threats or demands, but with humility. It was a bitter pill to swallow for a proud species like the Virik, but survival now depended on understanding their new enemy. Messages were dispatched through neutral channels, requesting a meeting on neutral ground. To the Virik's surprise, the humans responded swiftly, and the location for their summit was set. It would take place on a remote station on the edge of Federation space. The Virik delegation, led by Trath, arrived first, their apprehension masked by a practiced stoicism. Yet, there was an unmistakable tension among the Virik officials. For the first time, they were preparing to face a species they had provoked and feared. When the human delegation arrived, they were led by none other than Ambassador Carla Ruiz, her presence calm and collected. Her team consisted of high-ranking diplomats, military advisors, and most curiously, a scientist named Dr. Amarachin. The Virik watched her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Bringing a scientist to a diplomatic meeting was an unusual choice. Carla greeted Trath with a nod, her expression neutral, yet not hostile. Ambassador Trath, she said, her voice steady, We received your message. I hope this is a sign that the Virik wish to move forward in peace. Trath stiffened, feeling the weight of his people's expectations on his shoulders. He had been so sure of himself before, so certain of the Virik's superiority, but now he saw the humans in a new light, a light that made him wary. Ambassador Ruiz, he began, his voice slightly hesitant, we have come to understand that we may have misjudged humanity. Your people's strength has taken us by surprise. Carla regarded him with a level gaze, her expression softening. Strength, Ambassador, is not always what it seems. Humanity has endured countless hardships on our homeworld. Wars, natural disasters, societal collapse, and rebirth. We have learned, over millennia, that survival means adaptation. When we joined the Galactic Federation, we came hoping to leave behind the need to prove ourselves through conflict. Trath nodded, struggling to set aside his pride. Your warnings, we thought they were a bluff. A means to protect yourselves because you were weaker than us. Dr. Amara Chun, the scientist, leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. Ambassador Trath, may I offer a different perspective? Humanity's warnings were not made out of fear or weakness. They were offered because we understand the cost of conflict all too well. We have paid that price, generation after generation, and we hope to spare your people, and ourselves, that pain. Counselor Zarek, who had accompanied Trath, narrowed her eyes. You speak as though war is an art you have mastered. But how could a species so young know such depth of hardship? Dr. Chin met Zarek's gaze with quiet intensity. Counselor, perhaps youth and experience are not always connected. Our history has been tumultuous, shaped by constant challenges, both internal and external. When we warn other species to avoid pushing us, we're not boasting. We're offering an honest request. We know that when humans are pushed, we respond with everything we have. Not because we seek to dominate, but because our survival has always depended on it. The Virik delegation listened in silence, processing her words. There was a vulnerability in Dr. Chen's voice, an echo of countless struggles that struck an unexpected chord. Trath felt a strange, uncomfortable empathy stirring within him, a sensation he had not anticipated. Then why, if you are capable of such strength, did you not show it from the beginning? He asked quietly. Carla sighed, her gaze turning distant. Because we value peace, Ambassador. The true strength of humanity is not in our ability to fight, but in our capacity to hope, to strive for something beyond survival. But if forced, we will defend ourselves, not out of pride, but out of necessity. And we warned you because we have learned that war, once started, rarely leaves anyone unscathed. The Virik delegation exchanged looks, the weight of her words sinking in. They had always seen war as a means of proving dominance, of establishing respect. But here was a species that had learned a different lesson, a species that fought only as a last resort, and with a fierceness that came from hard-earned wisdom rather than desire for power. Counselor Zarek finally spoke, her voice carrying a note of reluctant admiration. Ambassador Ruiz, Dr. Chun, I believe we understand humanity better now. Our pride may have clouded our judgment, and we did not take your warnings seriously. For that, I apologize on behalf of the Virik Council. The sincerity in Zarek's words seemed to take the humans by surprise. Carla inclined her head in a respectful nod. Thank you, Counselor Zarek. Humanity holds no desire for conquest or revenge. We only ask for mutual respect, and for the freedom to coexist in peace. A silence settled over the room. A moment of understanding that felt almost sacred. The Virik had come seeking answers, and what they had found was a reminder that true strength lay not in might, but in the willingness to protect what one cherished most. Humanity's warnings, once seen as arrogance, now held a new meaning. As the meeting drew to a close, Carla offered a final thought. Ambassador Trath, Counselor Zarek, please remember that humanity is as diverse as any other species. While we value peace, we are united by an unbreakable resilience. Pushing us to war only awakens that resilience, and it's not something we unleash lightly. Trath nodded, humbled in a way he had never thought possible. We will remember Ambassador Ruiz. And thank you for sparing us from the full measure of that resilience. With that, the Viric delegation departed, carrying back to their people a newfound respect for humanity. They had come seeking answers, but they had left with a lesson that every species in the galaxy would soon learn. From that day forward, humanity's warnings were taken seriously. No longer were they seen as idle words or posturing, but as a sign of wisdom, a symbol of a species that had fought countless battles and still chose peace. And across the stars, a new phrase emerged in the Federation's lexicon, passed down from one species to another. Leave humans alone, for they have the strength to endure, but the wisdom to avoid war whenever they can. And so, humanity found its place among the stars, not through conquest, but through respect earned the hard way. The galaxy, once filled with skeptics, had come to understand that Earth's warnings were not threats, but a plea from a species that knew the true cost of conflict.